Well, it's great to be back with you again tonight. Another great question. Can anyone claim to really know God? You know, since the earliest recorded human civilizations, all cultures, all peoples, at all times, but in many different ways, have been, in the broadest possible sense, religious. Throughout history, there's always been some sort of human response to something that we think is beyond us, something supernatural. Perhaps we might say some response to the divine. You know, in the West, there's this popular idea that religious belief is in terminal decline. But actually, statistics show that globally, religious belief is an all-time high. I was reading in the Guardian newspaper a couple of summers ago an article which said faith is on the rise and 84% of the global population identifies with a religious group. The article went on to say that the world is actually getting more religious, not less. I wonder if you know how many different religions there are out there. Do you know there are estimated to be more than 4,300 different religions somewhere in the world? Now, if you examine the data, it's common to say that there are 12 major world religions that people would call world faiths. And I thought it might be a bit of fun to see how many of them we could name as a group. A bit like those online games you sometimes play on the BBC. Can you name all the different religions, the top 12, in terms of the number of adherents in the world? Have a go. Put them in the chat, and our hosts will call them out for you.
All right, so we have Christianity, we have Buddhism, Judaism, Islam, there's a lot of Islams there actually. There's Jain, I don't think I've actually heard of that one. What else is there? Have we got any more? We have Jedism, I believe. We have, oh wow, there's some I actually don't even know how to pronounce. So I'm gonna try and pronounce that one. Zoroastrianism, is it?
Zoroastrianism, I think it's pronounced.
Have I pronounced it? Yeah.
I see a Taoism. I see Baha'i.
Yeah. You put Buddhism. What else happened? Yeah, you've put there's you've put Hinduism there. Islam. Have we got any more? I'm missing out any. We have, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing these. This is where we have Shinto. We don't know if that's okay. Yeah, that's there. We have Krishna. We have Krishna, so it's H-A-R-E, not H-A-I-R. Yeah. What else do we have yet? And then we have Protestantism, I think. I haven't embarrassed myself there. I probably have.
Fantastic. You've pretty much got them all there, I think, which is amazing. Nice. So the list is Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Sikhism, Baha'i, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Confucianism, Shinto, and Jainism. We did, in fact, get them all. Fantastic. Big round of applause. You don't need to attend my lectures at Durham or at Manchester Universities on World Faiths. You know the Big 12. Can anyone claim to know God? That's tonight's subject. And given the statistics that we've just seen, you would think that since most people in the world claim to have some religious belief, then they'd answer our question, yes. But the problem is, not all of these world religions would say that you can know God. Some of these world religions don't even believe in the existence of a personal deity. but they teach that all that we see is actually an illusion. Others of the religions say, oh, there is a God, but he's fundamentally unknowable. You can't know God. You can only know that he exists. I wonder what we are going to say about this question. I spend a lot of my time teaching about other faiths and Christianity's response to them. And I do quite a lot of that here in the UK. And many British people that I meet hold to a seemingly tolerant viewpoint that it doesn't really matter what you believe, as long as you're nice. Some people will go further than that and say, look, it doesn't really matter because basically all religions are the same. You believe yours and I'll believe mine and we'll all be fine. Still others would say, hang on a minute though, religion is the cause of all sorts of trouble in the world. The best thing to do would be to abolish it. I wonder if you've ever thought or currently think some of these things. And imagine one day you meet a Christian who tells you that Christianity is the only true faith and you must follow Jesus. And then the next day you meet a Muslim who tells you that Islam is the only true way. You must submit to Allah and follow the teaching of his final prophet Muhammad. Then the day after that, you meet a Buddhist who really impresses you with his calm and tolerant viewpoint. And his viewpoint is that everything we see is an illusion. And you think, oh, that sounds interesting. And at the end of the day, you just throw up your hands and say, oh, for goodness sake, surely there are so many different roads up one mountain, but at the top, there's only ever one moon. So many people I meet have this view of religions. And they say, look, arguing about religion is really fruitless and it often causes conflict. And I agree, it does. But then so does arguing about other things, arguing about non-religion or atheism, arguing about politics, arguing about democracy, arguing about human rights, and a host of other things also cause conflict. It's actually deeply offensive to believers in many of these religions to say that all religions are basically the same, because these faiths teach mutually exclusive things. They've got very different conceptions of God and of our relationship to him. They've got very different ideas about the purpose of human life. And actually, it's an extremely arrogant position to say that all religions are the same, as if we know better because we're the enlightened Westerners. It's also intellectually lazy just to say that without ever having looked into any of them in any great detail. And if you hold to the outlaw all religions ideas, then I just invite you to look at the communist dictators of the 20th and 21st century to see just where such an attitude can lead. So can anyone claim to know God? Well, look, let's first assume, for the sake of argument, assume the existence of a supreme being, a first cause, from where or from whom all things come. Is it not logical to say that this supreme being can only be known in as much as he, she, or it wants to be known? Are we not dependent on this being for any knowledge of him at all? We don't have any power in and of ourselves to find and know this being unless this being wants to be known. We can only know based on something called revelation. God, the deity, revealing himself to the things that he's made. And there are two kinds of knowing, aren't there? Knowing information about someone and having a relationship with someone. For example, I might say to you, look, I know the Queen. Yeah, I do. I know the Queen of the United Kingdom. I can tell you how old she is. I can tell you what she looks like. I can tell you who she's married to, who her children are, where she lives. I've even heard her speak about what she believes sometimes. And I've even been to a garden party that she was at once. Do you think that I know the Queen? I mean, who can know the Queen? I could only really know the Queen if she chose to meet me, to spend time with me, to be open and reveal her character to me. Then I would know her. Maybe as much as, or maybe not quite, but nearly as much as our husband and her children can know her relationally. And that's a helpful analogy when it comes to God. You see, in Christianity, we also think about two ways of knowing, two kinds of revelation, if you like. The first kind is knowing things about God in a general way. The idea here is there's a lot we can know about God because of what he has made. You know, the complexity and the design within creation, the beauty within creation tells us something about God's power, about God's creativity, about God's glory and majesty. I mean, which one of us hasn't experienced the transcendent majesty of a breaking dawn, or being on top of a mountain and seeing this view which is breathtaking? Or maybe that moment when you're absolutely rapturously lost in wonder at a beautiful piece of music. Or you're sitting in a national gallery marveling at a work of art. All this creative culture reflects the beauty, the creativity of the divine. And our enjoyment of it indicates something that the ancient philosophers used to call the sense of the divine. The sense of the divine, which is found in every human being. You know, there's just sometimes you just know there's something out there, something beyond you, something beautiful, something powerful, something transcendent. What you're experiencing is what every person on the planet experiences. It's some limited knowledge about God, general revelation. And I think that the origin of most religions in the world can be traced to this idea. It's a response to what can be known about him through creation. All people on earth can experience and learn things about God from what he's made. But there's a second kind of knowing, isn't there? And I want to say to you that knowing God in a relational sense is a totally different thing. The second kind of revelation that Christianity talks about, we call special revelation. Rather than revealing what we can know about God, special revelation helps us to actually know him and be in a relationship with him. And once again, as I've said on the previous two talks, this is something that makes Christianity a unique faith. No other religion or pattern of belief claims to make a way for you and me to be in a personal relationship with God. And I'm going to say again that it's the person and revelation of Jesus Christ that makes Christianity unique. Here's another quotation. One of the eyewitnesses to Jesus' life, to his death and his resurrection. We've looked at this guy a couple of times. He also wrote this. Thank you, Jamie. He wrote, "No one has ever seen God. The only God who is at the Father's side, he has made him known. No one has ever seen God. The only God who's at the Father's side, he has made him known." It's a difficult sentence in English, isn't it? But it's an incredible claim. The only God who is at the Father's side is referring to Jesus himself, the Word, the Son of God. And he has made God known. Jesus himself is recorded by this same eyewitness as saying to one of his followers who asked him, "Jesus, show us the Father, show us God, and that's going to be enough." He responded by saying this, "Don't you know me, Philip? He who has seen me," Jesus said, "has seen the Father." He who has seen me has seen the Father. What an incredible claim. What an incredible thing to say. Thank you for the quote. Take it off. Thanks, Jamie. That God would choose to reveal himself in the particular person of Jesus Christ is a unique claim. Most religions have a founder or a teacher who points the way that we should live so that we might eventually reach God. But in Christianity, God himself comes down in Christ to find us, to reveal himself to us, so he can be in relationship with us. Can anyone really claim to know God? Might be the wrong question. Anyone can claim to know God, can't they? Perhaps the better question is, can anyone actually know God relationally? Can anyone actually know God? And the answer to this question is yes, because he has made himself knowable in Jesus. Now, I want you to hear that this wonderful news is totally inclusive. Any person of whatever background, of whatever culture, of whatever nation can truly know God in Jesus Christ. God is universally knowable. He is not restricted to people of certain cultures, certain ethnicities, or social backgrounds. You don't need to be middle class, respectable, white, male, educated, or whatever to know God in Christ. In fact, the vast majority of the world's Christians are neither white nor university educated. I personally know people from a Muslim, Hindu, Chinese, and Buddhist background who personally decided to follow Jesus because they discovered themselves that that was the only way they could know God in relationship. Christianity is a global faith that inhabits and makes itself at home in all cultures. Whoever you are, you do not need to abandon your cultural roots or your family background. But I know that still some of us listening to this feel really uncomfortable. Because isn't it arrogant to say this? Please listen very carefully. I've spent the better part of my adult life seeking to make Jesus Christ known to people from all faith backgrounds. I believe firmly that everyone has the right to choose to follow any faith or no faith at all. I believe that anyone has got the right to change their faith too, if they want to. But there's no place for coercion or emotional pressure. There's no place for disrespect of other people. There is no place for hatred or hostility. And where this has happened in our history, we must apologize. We must do better. But you see, I also firmly believe that it is possible to respect you, to love you even, and yet disagree with your beliefs at the same time. I know that's getting harder to accept these days in our culture, but I believe it's true. I can disagree with your belief and yet love you and respect you the same. I've got many friends from different faith backgrounds who I count as friends, who I enjoy conversing with, who I enjoy living life with. We don't agree, but we're friends. We respect each other. You see, at the end of the day, Christianity is either right or it's wrong. One of my good friends here in Huddersfield is an imam. He believes, as a Muslim, that Jesus lived, but he didn't die and was taken to heaven and will come back one day. My Jewish friend in Manchester, he believes that Jesus died and remains dead. And I believe that Jesus died and was raised to life again, lives today in heaven, and will return in glory. Two of us are wrong. And I'm not embarrassed to say that. Two of us are wrong. The question we're asking, the question you need to ask yourself is, Which one's right about Jesus? Is he dead? Did he die and be raised to life again? Or did he not die at all and was translated somewhere else? Only one of those can stand as true. We all, you see, every one of us listening to this, we all make truth claims of some sort. Even if you say that all religions are the same, that in itself is a truth claim. If you say that all religions should be got rid of, it's because you're claiming some superior knowledge that none of them are true. That's a truth claim. We all believe different things that are incompatible. And it's really hard to weigh them responsibly, but we've got no alternative but to try. And let me say this, this is the most important thing that you will ever consider. That's why I don't think it's arrogant for me to aim to persuade you respectfully to trust Jesus, to follow Jesus, to believe in the teachings of Christianity, because I believe it really is a life and death issue. It really matters. And if you believe that, as I do, you're going to live your life trying to share this wonderful news of what God has done in Christ lovingly and respectfully to everybody you meet. Whoever you are tonight, I believe that you also need to respond to the God of all the world in his unique revelation in Jesus Christ. I believe you also need to come into relationship with God in this way. And the fantastic news is you can do that right now if you're willing. You can turn to God right now, wherever you are, whoever you are, and you can tell him, I want to be in a relationship with you through Jesus. You can tell him, God, I've been far from you, and I really do want to know you. Say to him, please forgive me for my sins, the wrong thoughts and actions that I've had, and help me begin a new life, trusting and believing in Jesus. Thank him that you can be in a relationship with him, and ask him to help you to live in a way that's pleasing to him. That's a prayer. That's a prayer of commitment. You can pray that right now where you are. You can pray it later. And if you do either of those things, do tell somebody that you know is a Christian. And if you're not sure about this stuff, do stay on and come and ask me some questions later. I'll say again, I am not going to put any pressure or coercion on anybody. I'll respectfully listen to you and I'll respect you as a person. But I believe every one of us needs to put our trust in Jesus Christ, the unique revelation of God. That is how we can know God, because God has made himself known in Jesus. There's other things that you can do, of course. We're going to hear an advert in a minute for something called Christianity Explored, which is a great way of exploring the claims of Christ, again, in a no pressure, relaxed kind of way. Or you can come to some of the other events this week, come back to our final talk on Friday night. But do ask your questions. Do stay on and pray with and chat to other people. This is the most important thing that you're ever going to decide. So take the opportunity tonight to make a decision. Thanks so much for listening. I'll stop there and hand back to the hosts.
Slido up here, and I'm just Gerard, pretty much this question is going to be all for you to answer. So we have one saying, is there any proof that Jesus was actually God incarnated and not just lying?
Thank you. Yeah, really good. So proof comes from the eyewitness accounts that were written down soon after Jesus' death and resurrection. These things are called Gospels. You'll find 4 of them in the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Members of the Christian Union can give you a free copy of Mark, Uncover Mark. And it's in reading what these eyewitnesses wrote that you see that Jesus himself demonstrated and claimed that he was God incarnate. It's very clear in these eyewitness accounts. So my answer to that is, go read the biographies well, go read them with an open mind, go read them with friends and discuss them. And you look at it yourself and say, is there proof here from these 4 different accounts?
Wow, that's brilliant. And the books actually look somewhat like this.
Nice, nice. Well done, Mike.
There it is. Here is the uncover mark. So yeah, again, be in contact with us if you're wanting to get that. Next question we have for you. Why are you convinced that you're right about Jesus' life, death, and resurrection?
Thanks for that. That's a really good question. I mean, what am I now? I'm past 50 now, and I've lived a long time. I didn't really believe this until I was 20, when I was at university in my final year. I'd been brought up Roman Catholic, and though I heard it all the time as a kid, it didn't really ever settle with me. But what happens is, when you start to investigate, when you start to read widely, when you start to examine Christianity, and then as you get older, start to examine other faiths, and I did a lot of research in Islam. I did my PhD in Islam, actually. You start to explore the other alternatives. You come back to how convincing, how coherent, how much sense the Christian narrative makes of human reality. And so at that kind of proof level, it's got explanatory power. It explains things in a way that other faiths don't. That sort of very intellectual exploration level. But experientially, I also know it to be true, because these past 30 years, I've had this relationship with God in Christ. I experience his presence with me. I experience that the Bible, his word, is true. It guides, it shapes, it comforts my life. And so I won't want to say ground it all in experience. You ground it in exploring the truth of the Bible, but experientially kind of confirms it to me, I suppose. So I'm absolutely convinced about the life, the incarnation, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus.
Wow, amazing. Amazing, brilliant. Another question we have for you here says, should Christianity be classed as a relationship with God rather than a religion?
That's really funny someone's asked that question. I was teaching a class today where somebody said the same thing. You know, lots of Christians who walk with Jesus hate this idea of calling it a religion, because a religion sounds like all this stuff that I've got to do to kind of earn favor with God. And often non-Christians kind of think that might be what Christianity is. So at one level, if that's how you think of a religion, don't class Christianity as a religion, because it isn't about what must I do to earn God's favor. It's about discovering what God has done for you in Christ. The trouble is, the rest of the world calls Christianity, the faith that we hold dear, a religion. And so just to tell them, no, you can't call that a religion, I think that gives us, it sets out a special privilege for us that I don't think we can define ourselves. I don't describe myself as religious. I describe myself to my friends as a person of faith. I think it's a more positive word. Religion sounds very heavy and negative. What must I do? Whereas faith is much more dynamic and relational. So reclassify it if you like, but the rest of the world won't agree with you.
Most definitely. Another question we have for you here, right, there's questions flying. Really good questions as well, definitely. Keeping the comment. It says, isn't it just an assumption of the divine cause, not the true knowledge of it, that leads to you think that God is responsible for the beauty of nature?
Well, it's one or the other, isn't it? It's a very philosophical question. There is the assumption of the divine cause, which gives explanation to the transcendent feelings that I experience. What is the alternative? There are alternative explanations, but they seem less adequate to me. They're based on neurological, they're based on biological, they're based on things that are really hard to prove, really hard to demonstrate, really hard to build your life on. And when I think back to how I started my talk, it's fascinating, isn't it, that across human history, there has always been this response, this seeking explanation, seeking something beyond us. Got to account for that somehow. You can account for it if you try in evolutionary biology, but when you weigh up the two arguments side by side, I think you discover that you need a lot of faith to believe in evolutionary biology, in the same way that you might argue you need faith to trust that it's the divine, the sensus divinatus, the sense of the divine that's at work in you. There's a verse in the Bible that says, God has placed eternity in the heart of mankind. I love thinking about that. There's something like a God-shaped hole. There's something that's missing from your life without some sort of response to the divine. So you can debate it philosophically, but again, I think that the sense of the divine is a better explanation as to why there is this common human urge for the transcendent. These questions are all brilliant, and I know there's loads more in here. Let me urge you, please stay on afterwards. Come into a little room with me. I'd love to chat about these things. I could sit there, have a beer with you or whatever for hours and talk about these things. So if you don't get your question answered, stay on, come in the chat room, we'll have another chat. Sorry, Jack.
Yeah, that's all right, brilliant. I believe because of time, unfortunately, we only have time for one more question. But again, like Gerard said, he'll be more than happy to, again, just talk with you, have a chat with you. In case, of course, you didn't have your question answered, then please just feel free, stay behind, and you'll be more than happy to, of course, answer your question. We'll have this last one here. Sorry, let's just go on here. Yeah, there we go. It says, at the start, you said about assuming that some sort of God is real. Why is this assumption true?
Very similar to the last question. You've got two choices, haven't you? Either there is a God or there isn't a God. You explore both. You explore the implications of both. And my simple argument is there is greater explanatory power in the Christian narrative for where we come from, why we're here, what our purpose is, and what really matters to us. There's greater explanatory power in the existence of God than there is in the alternative that we are just a collection of atoms randomly placed, randomly appearing from nowhere on this remote speck of cosmic dust. I think it's about which one explains the human situation better. And in my understanding, assuming that there is a God in the first place does just that. But of course, you're free to disagree. There is no coercion. There is no pressure. But ask these questions. Spend your time researching this. It's the most important question you'll ever ask.